Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today got a build for you, this one as a Lich, which it's been a while since I played with. This one's going to be based around Spirit Plague and stacking as much int as possible to get as much spell damage for Spirit Plague so that you can pop enemies with it, and every time you kill an enemy with it, it'll jump to another nearby enemy, which is very satisfying for absolutely wiping out especially densely populated maps. Now we'll also be running 𝐓𝐤𝐻𝐭𝐚𝐦𝐻𝐿, and you'll be in Reaper form to have some extra boost of damage from that. The 𝐻𝐭𝐚𝐦𝐻𝐿, again, just an added proc for when we get hit and when we have 𝐓𝐤𝐻𝐿 active. 𝐓𝐤𝐻𝐿 also is mostly being used for the immense damage reduction that you get for it, and then Reaper form as well for increased damage while in it, and then also the fact that it's basically a free life, so when you take a hit you just get knocked out of it. With all that, this is very good for speed farming and speed running through maps in the end game. In the gameplay right now we're just over 300 corruption and still just flying through the maps. I do warn you though, single target will be a bit slower, as it's kind of always been with Spirit Plague, but it does have the ability to do all of the content in the game. With that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into the skills and passives and just how it all works. For skills, I'm running Spirit Plague, 𝐓𝐤𝐻𝐿, Wandering Spirits, Hungering Souls, and a Reaper form. For Spirit Plague, we do have 2 additional levels to this. If you get higher tiers or the Exalted Affixes form, you can get 3 or 4 levels, which will help you do even a little bit more damage. But for Spirit Plague, we have the setup to cast very fast to do as much damage with the Spirit Plague itself and for the Plague that it puts on, as well as scale with your int in order to give you more flat necrotic spell damage with the skill itself. So we've got 2 points in Pestilence so that we get increased global damage over time, which can stack up to 13 times, so the more you use Spirit Plague, the more damage over time you'll do. We also have 1 point in Plague Bearer to inflict Plague, 2 points in Queen of Plague so that you get poison penetration with the Plague, and 2 points in Endless Decay so that your poison damage also stacks up to 13 times as you use the skill. So you're getting increased dot damage and poison damage as a really nice global buff. We also have 3 points in Perpetuity so that you have 60% increased cast speed as well as more duration of the Spirit Plague itself. 2 points in Efficacious Application for the mana efficiency and duration. Boy, not nailing the names today. 5 points in Rotten to the Core for Spirit Plague to deal more damage, 2 points in Concentrated Rot for even more damage, and then 1 point in Hindering Affliction, 1 point in Enfeeblement, and then that 1 point in Plague of Eyes for that spell necrotic damage per point of int. And you can scale a lot of int because you can get 60 points of it plus just in your passives alone, which is really, really nice. For 𝐓𝐤𝐻𝐿, we have this set up to proc Hungering Souls to cap our life at low life to give us a ton of increased damage, a ton of increased armor, and then of course it also gives us a bunch of damage reduction on top of stopping all that health degeneration we get through all the passives. So we've got 3 points in Moratorium for that duration, 1 point in Devouring Release for that Hungering Soul to have a 70% chance to proc a single projectile every 1.5 seconds. However, with 4 points in Insatiable Soul, that 112% increased frequency lowers that down to about 3/4 of a second, which means you basically have a 70% chance to proc it every 0.7 seconds. So on average, you should have 1 Hungering Soul per second. 1 point in Soul Stability reduces the current health drain. This won't stop the degen of, say, Reaper form, but all the health degeneration that you're getting through all of your passives, it will stop all of that, which is really nice. 5 points in Corrupted Consciousness for increased damage based on our missing life, which again, with 3 points in Desperate Shroud to give us armor, and then the 1 point in Deadlock, will be sealed at 33% of our maximum, so you'll have 67% of your missing life, which means here you divide the 67% by 3, giving you just over 22, times that by 5, you'll have 110% increased damage. Minimum, because you might seal even lower than the 33% of your health, but bare minimum you'll have 110% increased. And then we also have a point in Mortal Pulse for that death wave every second, and 1 point in Tachycardia for that death wave to have increased frequency as well as a higher chance to do a critical strike. For Wandering Spirits, we really like these because we can just put it on autocast and then allow them to basically always be going behind us as we go through with Spirit Plague. So they're just a nice buff to the game. They also debuff the enemies with Necrotic Res Shred, which is really nice as well. So we got 2 points in Souls of Rage, 3 points in Poison Minds because we are doing lots of poison, so they do increase damage to poisoned enemies. 2 points in Lingering Souls, and 2 points in Reap the Damned, so that they deal additional damage to cursed enemies as well as to damned enemies, which is really nice. They will apply damned to themselves, and we can curse them with other things like Spirit Plague, for instance. Then we've got 3 points in Spirit Swarm, 3 points in Drained Will, so they do Necrotic Res Shred every second, 1 point in Sins of Forgotten, so they have a damned chance every second, then 1 point in Terrifying Presence, so they can fear enemies, keeping them away from hitting you, as well as False Courage, so they deal even more damage. Then for Hungering Souls, again, we have this mostly proccing automatically through Death Seal, that 70% chance every 0.7 seconds, and then we're doing a single projectile with it since that's all that Death Seal will, and then we also have it set up so that when we get hit, there's a good chance for it to proc as well. 1 point in Forbidden Pact, 1 point in Isolation, 4 points in Great Soul for all that extra damage, 2 points in Piercing Gaze, and 2 points in Hungering Eye so we can try and get as much damage out of a critical strike hit as we can, 3 points in Ravenous for that necrotic damage on hit, 1 point in Vengeful Souls, so there's a chance every time we get hit to have Hungering Souls fire out, and a 70% chance that it'll be a single projectile, which is fine because that's how we're building it. With another 3 points in Risen Hatred and 3 points in Lament, you have a much higher chance of that proccing when you get hit. And then for Reaper Form, we have the setup to give us a ton of increased spell damage, and then also a lot of armor and necrotic and poison res. We got 2 points in Mistress of Decay, 3 points in Soul Shroud for that armor per point of int, which we have about 150 int on this build, so this is 450 flat armor, which is really nice. 1 point in Vile Shroud is also going to give us a ton of poison and necrotic res, though we still get it on gear because you won't always be in Reaper form, and you're most vulnerable when you're not in it, so you do want to have those caps so when you do fall out of Reaper form, you don't get one shot. 3 points in Harbinger of Blood, 2 points in Reaper's Ascendance, 4 points in Soul for a Soul, 4 points in Reaper's Curse, and then 1 point in Death's Door for that Reaper damage per missing health, as well as increased damage at low life, which again, you will be at low life when you have Death Seal active and your health is sealed. For passives, we've got 25 points in the base Acolyte class, with 5 in Blood Aura, 5 points in Blood Pact, 7 points in Stolen Vitality, and 8 points in Forbidden Knowledge, as you really want that int. Then we have 86 points in the Lich Our Mastery, with 10 points in Apocrypha for another 10 Intelligence, 8 points in Survival of the Cruel, because we want to leech as much spell damage as possible. We have tons of leech on this build. 8 points in Dance with Death, again, because we will spend a lot of time, especially when Death Seal is active, at low life. Then we've got 8 points in Crippling Insight for another 16 int, 5 points in Enclosing Wounds for a ton of increased damage, 8 points in 3 Plagues for that necrotic penetration. We also do some poison, so that penetration is nice as well. 1 point in Contagion Engines, so that we have some increased damage over time on recent kill. 10 points in Necrotic Energy for all that spell necrotic damage. 5 points in Ageless Ascetic for additional cast speed, move speed, and even more damage leech. And then 5 points in Soul Maul for even more leech, with 10 points in Mind Over Body for another 20 int, and then Corrosive Consciousness for a bunch of increased spell damage and damage over types, which really synergizes with the build quite well. And then for the character sheet, because your idols can be health idols, it's very easy to get over 3,000 health as long as you have some good hybrid health idols. On top of that, you don't have any uniques on this build, which allows you to have a ton of health and a lot of slots on your gear. You want to cap out those resistances. Remember, your armor is going to go up, so when we go into Reaper form here, you'll see that I'm up to 33% damage reduction. I also don't have the blessings for flat and increased armor. If I farmed those, we could easily get this above 40%, which would be nice. Remember to cap out your endurance, as we're not a low life build, and your critical strike avoidance. And then for our gear, you can see we have absolutely no uniques required on this build. The main things that you want is to get intelligence on everything you can, whether it's tier 5, tier 6, tier 7, make sure you got it. You want to stack as much int as possible. I have quite a few pieces here that only have tier 5 on them, so it's possible to get even more intelligence than what I have here, which is 165. With tier 7 rules on everything, you should be able to get to about between 180 and 200 if you really min-max and have really good rules. And then for the weapon, we're going with a one-handed weapon, because with a one-handed weapon, even with all the int that you get on your Catalyst, you end up not that much lower of spell damage than you would have wearing a two-hander, but you can easily go a two-hander if you want. But this also allows you to, if you want to, just work in a shield, especially for boss fights, much easier. Again, a two-handed weapon is really good and going to do just as much for you, but again, with this, with a little extra base critical strike chance, those Hungering Souls do just a little bit more damage, even though it's not our main damage type. But this just allowed us to give more fixes so that we could get our resistances and everything else capped nice and easy. And then again, just get as much health and as much resistance as you can to be as tanky as possible, because this build has plenty of damage just based on all the int that you have. And then again, for idols, get as many health and elemental resist if you need it, but as many hybrid health idols as you can, along with void resist, necrotic resist, physical resist, whatever else you need to cap out those resistances. And then for how to play the build, I play it with Wandering Spirits and Reaper form, both on autocast, and then I just go ahead and activate my Death Seal whenever I need to, and fire Spirit Plagues everywhere. I don't manually cast the Hungering Souls, it's really not needed, and you get more of a benefit of just spamming Spirit Plague as much as possible. Here you can see when everything's active, we're usually doing about 100k to 200k ticks on the training dummy. And again, single target's not going to be its greatest strength, but it definitely is possible to speed run through maps really fast, which is really nice. As you can see in the gameplay, 300 corruption, you just see enemies dropping all over the place with just a single Spirit Plague on them, which is really nice. Again, single targets will take a little bit longer. Your survivability is really good. You can do all the content in the game, but that's where I'm going to leave you guys with this one. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoy it. I'm going to leave you guys with that build planner and the loot filter in the description. And as always, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.